The night was heavy with snow. The wind howled like a wild beast, throwing sharp flakes into the man's face. His boots sank deep into the frozen ground with every step. He pulled his coat tighter around his shoulders, but even that was not enough to keep the bitter cold away. The world around him was silent, only the storm speaking in long, cruel screams. He was alone, or so he thought. He had been walking for hours, searching for a safe place to rest. The frozen forest was endless, trees bending under the weight of snow, branches snapping now and then. His breath came out in clouds of white, rising and vanishing quickly into the black sky. He had learned long ago that in a world like this, silence usually meant death. So when a sound finally came, soft and weak, he froze in his tracks. It was not the wind, not an animal. It was a voice. A small, trembling voice carried on the storm. He held his breath and listened. Human. Please help. His heart jumped. The voice was thin, almost broken, but it was clear. Someone or something was calling to him. He turned his head quickly, scanning the shadows between the trees. For a moment there was nothing. Then from behind a fallen log something moved. At first he thought it was a child lost in the storm. Small, hunched, shaking. But as the figure stepped into the faint light of his lantern, his eyes widened. The creature was not human. Its skin was pale, almost silver under the snowlight. Its eyes glowed faintly, large and wet with tears. Its clothes were torn, nothing more than thin scraps useless against the cold. The small being shivered so hard its teeth clicked. The man's first instinct was to reach for the knife on his belt. Alien. That was the word that rushed into his mind. He had seen them before from a distance, never this close. Many people feared them. Some even hunted them. But this one was no hunter. This one was just a child. The little alien raised its hands, palms open, a sign of peace. Its lips shook as it tried to speak again. My mother, she is freezing. Please, help. The man stood frozen. The storm pressed against his back, urging him to keep walking, to turn away. This was not his problem. He had his own life to think about. Helping an alien could bring danger. It could bring trouble with his own people. And yet, the look in the child's glowing eyes pulled at something deep in his chest. He took a slow step closer. The child flinched at first, but did not run. It only clasped its hands tighter, begging. Where is she? The man asked, his voice rough. The child pointed with a trembling hand toward the dark line of trees. This way, it whispered. Please hurry. The man hesitated. The forest beyond looked darker than the rest, almost like a mouth waiting to swallow him whole. His instinct screamed at him to stay away. But then the child stumbled, nearly falling into the snow, too weak to stand straight. Something inside him broke. Fine, he muttered. Show me. The child's face lit with hope, and without another word it turned and hurried into the trees. The man followed, his lantern swinging, casting long shadows that twisted like claws on the ground. The path was narrow, half buried in snow, branches reaching down to scratch at his coat. His heart beat faster with every step. The forest grew darker, quieter. Even the wind seemed to die here. The only sound was the crunch of their footsteps and the child's quick, shallow breaths. After what felt like forever, the child stopped. It pointed toward a low black shape at the base of a hill, a cave. The man tightened his grip on the lantern and stepped closer. The air around the cave mouth was heavy and strange, filled with the smell of frost and damp stone. Inside he saw a figure lying against the wall, covered in snow. The alien mother. She was tall, taller than any human woman, but thin as a shadow. Her skin was the same pale silver as the child's, but it was dull, cracked with cold. Her lips were blue. She did not move, did not even shiver. The man thought she might already be gone. The child ran to her side, dropping to its knees. Mother! It cried, shaking her weakly. I brought him. The human. He will help. The man stood at the entrance, torn between fear and duty. He could walk away. No one would ever know. But he saw the way the child pressed its tiny body against the mother's, trying to share its warmth. He saw the way those glowing eyes turned to him again, filled with desperate hope. The storm roared outside, but in the cave there was only silence and choice. The man slowly lowered his pack, pulling out a blanket and flint. He knelt near the cold stone floor, striking sparks, trying to build a flame. The child watched, breathless. The man's hands shook, but he forced them steady. A small fire caught, weak but real. The cave filled with a fragile glow, pushing back the shadows. He spread the blanket over the mother's body, tucking it close. The child's eyes widened as if seeing a miracle. The man said nothing. He only stared at the alien mother, her chest rising faintly with each slow breath. She was alive, barely. But outside the cave, hidden in the snow, something moved. The man did not see it yet. He did not hear the soft crunch of heavy paws in the distance. All he knew was that he had taken the first step into a choice that might change everything. The fire burned low, but it was enough to push the dark away. The man sat close, feeding it with dry sticks from his pack. The smoke curled up to the roof of the cave, disappearing into cracks in the stone. The alien child sat pressed against its mother's side, rubbing her arms, whispering in a language the man could not understand. Every few seconds the child's eyes lifted, checking the human as if afraid he might vanish like a dream. The mother looked half dead. Her skin was covered in frost, her lips pale. Yet her chest rose and fell in weak rhythm. The man studied her silently, wondering if she would survive the night. He had seen death many times before, but never one like this. Not alien. Not while a child begged him to fight it away. He reached into his coat, pulling out a small flask. He took a sip himself, then carefully held it out to the child. "Drink," he said. The child blinked, hesitated, then obeyed. It coughed at the burning taste, but swallowed. Then, with shaking hands, it pressed the flask to its mother's lips. A drop touched her tongue, and for the first time she stirred, letting out a faint moan. "She lives," the man said, his voice rough. The child looked at him with shining eyes. "Thank you," it whispered. The man turned his face away, uncomfortable. Gratitude was heavy, heavier than the storm outside. He did not want to carry it. He only wanted to survive, and yet here he was, kneeling beside strangers, keeping them alive. Hours passed. The fire grew stronger, warming the cave. The mother's breathing steadied, though her eyes stayed closed. The child, exhausted, leaned against the human's arm. For a long time he did not move, letting it rest. He told himself he should leave before dawn, before this became more than a mistake. But when the wind howled outside, he knew he would not. Not yet. Then he heard it. A sound beyond the storm. Low, heavy, like the growl of something vast moving across the snow. He froze, listening. His ears caught it again, closer this time. Crunching steps, deliberate, circling the cave. The child stirred. Its small body went stiff, ears twitching. Its eyes grew wide with terror. "Hunters," it whispered, voice trembling. The man frowned. "Hunters?" The child nodded quickly. "They smell weakness. They follow the sick, the dying. If they find us..." It could not finish. Tears welled in its eyes. The man rose silently, gripping the knife on his belt. He stepped toward the cave mouth, holding the lantern high. The snow outside was thick, falling in endless white curtains, but in the distance he thought he saw movement, shadows weaving between the trees. He felt the old instinct of fear crawl through his body. He had fought men before, even beasts, but this, he did not know what shape these hunters wore. The unknown was always worse than the blade. Behind him, the child clutched its mother tightly. "Don't let them take her," it begged. The man glanced back. He saw the child's face, pale and desperate, and he knew he could not walk away now. "Stay quiet," he said. "Keep her warm. I'll watch the entrance." He crouched near the fire and began stacking rocks, building a low wall just inside the cave mouth. It was crude, weak, but it would slow anything trying to enter. The child watched him, hope flickering in its eyes. "Why do you help?" it asked softly. The man kept his eyes on the stones. "Because you asked." The child was silent for a moment. Then it whispered, "Humans are kind." He did not answer. He did not want to admit he wasn't sure if kindness was the right word. He only knew something deep in him refused to abandon them. The growl came again, louder this time, echoing across the snow. His blood turned cold. He tightened his grip on the knife, staring into the storm. The firelight flickered against the cave walls, throwing long shadows that looked like teeth. Minutes passed like hours. The storm screamed, but beneath it he heard the hunters moving, circling, testing. He imagined glowing eyes staring back from the dark, waiting for the moment the fire died. The child pressed closer to its mother, whispering prayers. The man held his breath, straining to hear. Suddenly the sound of claws scraped across stone right outside the cave mouth. His heart pounded. The fire cracked behind him. Slowly, carefully, he rose to his feet. His knife gleamed faintly in the lantern glow. He stepped to the rock wall he had built and peered into the night. Snow blew wild across the ground, but between the flakes he saw it, huge, hunched with a body like a wolf but larger than a horse. Its breath came in clouds of steam. Its teeth shone white in the dark. The creature stared at the cave. At him, the man's hand tightened on the knife. He whispered to himself, "If you come in here, you'll meet me first." Behind him, the alien child held its mother, too afraid to breathe. The storm howled louder, and the beast outside gave a low, hungry snarl. The man stood ready, a single human against the dark, as the first hunter moved closer. The beast stood in the snow, silent now, its glowing eyes fixed on the cave. The man felt it stare like a knife against his skin. His breath slowed, his muscles tensed. He had seen dangerous animals before, but this creature was something else. It did not move like a wild beast. It moved like it understood, like it was waiting for him to make the first mistake. Behind him, the child whimpered, its small hands clutching its mother's arm. The fire cracked, throwing brief bursts of light across the stone walls. The man knew the fire was their only shield. Without it, the cold would kill them. Without it, the beast would charge. He leaned closer to the stone wall he had built and whispered, "Stay quiet. No matter what happens." The child nodded quickly, tears glistening in its glowing eyes. Outside, the snowstorm raged, but through the whirling white, the man saw more shadows moving. Not one beast, many. Shapes slipping between the trees, circling. His heart sank. They were being surrounded. The first beast gave a deep rattling growl. The others answered. The sound rolled across the forest like thunder, shaking the air. The child flinched. The mother stirred weakly, her lips parting as if she wanted to speak, but no words came. The man clenched his jaw. He had no gun, no bow, only a knife, some rocks, and his courage. It was not enough, and yet it had to be. Suddenly claws scraped against stone. The man turned. Another beast had climbed onto the rocks above the cave, its long body outlined against the stormy sky. Snow slid from its fur as it crouched low, lips pulling back to show long white fangs. The man lifted his knife, his arm steady. "Come on then," he muttered. The beast hissed, then leaped down, landing with a crash at the cave mouth. Snow burst into the air. The man stepped forward, knife raised, and slashed hard. The blade cut across thick fur, drawing black blood. The creature roared, a sound so loud it shook his bones. The child screamed, covering its ears. The man pressed forward, stabbing again. The beast snapped its jaws, missing his face by inches. Hot breath and foul stench washed over him. He shoved the creature back against the rocks, his knife buried in its shoulder. It howled and thrashed, then pulled away, retreating into the storm. The man's chest heaved, his arms trembling. Blood, not his, streaked the blade, but outside the growls grew louder. They had tasted the fight now. They knew prey was inside. The child crawled toward him, clutching his coat. "More will come," it cried. "They don't stop." The man looked out at the forest. Through the blowing snow, he counted glowing eyes. Not 2, not 3, at least 6. His stomach turned cold. He had no chance in the open. They needed to hold the cave or all was lost. "Back!" he shouted to the child. "Stay behind the fire." He dragged heavier rocks, stacking them higher at the entrance. His fingers went numb, but he worked fast, his breath sharp in his chest. The beasts prowled closer, circling like wolves. Their eyes flashed in the lantern light, yellow and hungry. Then, with sudden fury, one of them charged. It slammed into the wall of stones, scattering rocks across the cave floor. The fire sputtered from the shock. The man cursed, lunging with his knife. He stabbed at the gap, striking flesh. The beast yelped and pulled away, but not before another lunged from the side. Claws scraped across his arm, tearing fabric and skin. He gritted his teeth, ignoring the pain, and slashed back, driving it away. Blood dripped down his sleeve, warm against the cold. The child cried out, "They will kill us." "They always kill." The man turned his head, his eyes burning. Not tonight. The hunters regrouped outside, pacing, snarling, their bodies shadows in the snow. They were testing him, searching for weakness. The fire snapped and spat, but it was small, too small. He knew if it went out, they would rush in all at once. He dragged a burning branch from the fire and held it high, its flames whipping in the wind. He waved it at the cave mouth, daring the beasts. The firelight reflected in their eyes, making them flinch, but only for a moment. They were patient. They could wait longer than him. Behind him, the mother stirred again. Her eyes opened slightly, glowing faint silver. Her voice, weak but sharp, whispered, "If they smell fear, they will never stop." The man froze. She had spoken. Barely alive, but aware. He turned to her, his heart pounding. "What do you mean?" he asked. Her eyes flickered open wider, glowing faintly in the firelight. "They hunt the dying. They follow the weak. But they fear strength. They fear the one who does not bend." The man gripped the burning branch tighter. His arm throbbed with pain, but his voice was steady. "Then I'll give them something to fear." He stepped to the cave mouth, the flames casting his shadow tall against the snow. Outside, the hunters snarled and paced, their hunger thick in the air. The child watched him, trembling but full of hope. The man raised the fire high, standing firm against the storm. His voice carried across the night, strong and unyielding. "You want them?" he shouted. "You go through me." The beast roared back, shaking the forest. The fight was not over. It had only just begun. The cave glowed with firelight, but outside the hunters moved in restless circles. Their eyes flashed in the storm, yellow and cold, their growls rolling like thunder. The man stood at the entrance, a burning branch in one hand, a knife in the other. His breath came hard, clouds of white rising into the night. He knew he could not fight them all, but he also knew he could not step back. Behind him, the child clung to its mother, whispering, "Please don't let them in." The mother's eyes remained half-closed, but her weak voice reached him again. "Show no weakness. Stand tall. They will test you." The man's jaw tightened. He raised the torch higher, his shadow stretching across the snow. "Then let them test me," he muttered. The first beast lunged from the storm, leaping straight for the cave mouth. Its body was huge, covered in dark fur, its claws long as knives. The man swung the burning branch hard, striking it across the face. Fire licked its fur and it shrieked, crashing into the snow, rolling to put the flames out. The others roared in anger, their voices shaking the forest. The man threw the burned branch aside and gripped his knife with both hands. Another beast charged, slamming against the rock wall, breaking stones apart. Its jaws snapped at him, so close he could smell its hot, bloody breath. He stabbed forward, driving the blade into its mouth. The beast convulsed, howling before stumbling back, black blood dripping into the snow. The child gasped, eyes wide with terror and awe. "Human," it whispered, but there was no time to listen. A third hunter came from the side, claws swiping. The man ducked low, the claws tearing through his coat but missing his flesh. He rolled, grabbing another burning stick from the fire and shoved it straight into the beast's chest. Flames caught on its fur. The creature screamed, thrashing before retreating into the blizzard. The man panted, his arms trembling from the effort. His knife hand bled where claws had grazed him, but he did not let it weaken his grip. He turned to face the rest. The beasts were smarter now. They spread out, pacing, growling, their eyes locked on him. They knew he was dangerous, but they also knew he was only one. All they needed was a mistake. The child crawled closer to him, voice shaking. "Why do you fight for us?" "We are not your people. If you die, no one will know." The man did not turn his head. He kept his eyes on the hunters, his voice calm and sharp. "Because you asked." The child's lips trembled. Then it whispered, "Humans are strong." Snow whipped into the cave, the storm growing worse, as if the world itself wanted to bury them. The beasts gathered together now, their growls blending into one terrible sound. They were preparing for a final rush. The man felt the weight of it in his chest. If they all came at once, the cave would fall. The fire would die. The child and its mother would be torn apart. He looked at them one last time. The mother's glowing eyes flickered open, faint but steady. The child clung to her hand, looking at him with pure trust. He turned back to the storm. His grip tightened on the knife. His shoulders straightened. He planted his feet firm on the ground. For the first time that night, he did not feel the cold. The beast roared together and charged. The first slammed into him, claws ripping across his side. Pain exploded through his body, but he did not fall. He drove his knife into its neck, pulling it out with a spray of black blood. The second leapt over its fallen packmate, aiming for his head. He dropped low, rolling aside, then rammed his knife into its belly as it passed. The creature screamed, crashing into the fire, sparks flying everywhere. The flames grew wild, lighting the cave like day. The third came from behind, knocking him to the ground. He twisted, using his boot to kick it back. It snarled, snapping its jaws inches from his face. With a grunt, he shoved the knife upward, straight through its throat. Warm blood spilled over his hand, burning against the cold. He pushed the dead weight off and staggered to his feet, gasping for air. 3 down, but more circled still. His body bled from cuts and bruises, his strength fading. The child cried out, "You can't fight them all." The man spat blood from his mouth and raised his knife again. His voice was steady, cold as iron. "Watch me." The beasts hesitated. They had lost 3. Their snarls were less sure now. They circled wider, not daring to come too close. They saw not prey, but a wall of fire and steel that refused to break. The mother's weak voice filled the silence. "They fear you now. They see you are no dying thing. You are the storm." The man stood tall, blood dripping, breath sharp, knife gleaming in the firelight. Outside, the hunters backed into the snow, growling but retreating into the dark. One by one, their glowing eyes vanished into the blizzard. The cave grew quiet again. Only the crackle of the fire and the man's ragged breathing remained. He lowered his knife, shoulders heavy. His legs trembled, but he stayed standing, watching the night until he was sure they were gone. Behind him, the child whispered in awe. He stood against them all. The mother's eyes closed again, but a faint smile touched her lips. The man wiped the blood from his blade and sat down by the fire, exhausted but unbroken. For tonight at least they had survived. The cave was quiet again, but it was not the silence of peace. It was the heavy silence after violence, thick with blood and smoke. The fire burned strong now, flames licking high, its light falling over the stone walls and the fallen body of a beast just outside the entrance. Black blood stained the snow, steaming in the cold night air. The man leaned against the wall, his chest heaving. His knife dripped dark, and his clothes were torn and soaked with red. Some of it was the beast's. Too much of it was his own. His side burned with every breath. His arm was slick with blood from claw marks that cut deep. The alien child crawled to him quickly, panic in its glowing eyes. "You are hurt," it cried. Its small hands touched his arm, then his side. "Too much blood. You will die." The man grunted, shaking his head. "Not yet." He pressed his hand against the wound at his ribs, feeling warmth leak through his fingers. He knew it was bad. He had taken wounds before, but this one would take his strength fast. His vision blurred for a moment, the firelight bending and swaying. The child clutched his coat, refusing to let go. "You saved us. Please don't leave us now." The mother stirred at last, her body moving weakly under the blanket. Her eyes opened halfway, glowing dim silver. She looked at him and her cracked lips parted. "Human, you bleed." He gave a bitter laugh. "I've noticed." The child shook its head quickly, tears falling. "He fought for us, Mother. All of them." He stood alone. The mother's hand lifted with effort, trembling as it reached out. She pressed her palm against the man's chest. At first it was nothing, just a cold touch. But then slowly light began to glow from her skin. A faint silver shimmer spread from her hand, sinking into him. The man gasped, startled. Warmth moved through his chest, down his arms, into his wounds. It was not fire, not pain, it was something gentler. His cuts began to close, his bleeding slowed. The torn flesh knit together, leaving only scars. He stared at her, wide-eyed. "What are you doing?" The mother's voice was soft, weak but steady, giving back what was given. "Life for life." The child's face lit with wonder. "She is healing you. She still has power." The man's body trembled as strength returned to him. Not fully. He was still weak, still drained. But he no longer felt the darkness pulling him down. He could breathe again. He could move without collapsing. When the glow faded, the mother fell back, her hand slipping away. She closed her eyes, exhausted. The man caught her wrist gently. "Don't," he said. "You'll kill yourself." Her lips curved in a faint smile. "Better me than you. My child needs you." The man looked at the small alien clinging to his side, then back at the mother. For a moment, his chest felt heavier than any wound. He had not asked for this. He had not wanted to carry such weight. And yet here it was, placed in his hands by strangers in the snow. He pulled in a long breath, steadying himself. "Rest," he said at last. "You both need it. I'll keep watch." The child nodded quickly, but would not let go of his arm. "You promise you won't leave?" He looked at those glowing eyes, so full of trust. "I promise." Outside, the wind howled. The storm had not ended. And somewhere in the distance, another roar echoed across the forest. The man tightened his grip on the knife, though his body ached with weariness. He knew the hunters were not all gone. They would return when hunger drove them again. He dragged the dead beast closer to the fire, its body blocking part of the cave mouth. Its stench was foul, but it would serve as a warning to the others. Let them see what waited for them if they tried again. Hours passed in heavy silence. The mother slept, her breathing shallow but steady. The child leaned against the man's side, finally drifting into exhausted sleep. The man sat with his back to the wall, knife in hand, watching the fire, watching the shadows. His thoughts wandered. He had lived a life of loneliness, never tied to anyone. He had walked through storms and ruins, fought men and beasts, always for himself. But tonight he had stood for others. Tonight he had spilled blood not for survival alone, but for strangers who had begged for help. And now, as the child's small head rested against his arm, he felt something he had not felt in years. Weight. Yes, but also purpose. The storm raged on, but inside the cave warmth held. For the first time in many nights, the man allowed his eyes to close only for a moment. But outside, beyond the storm, the hunters were not the only danger. Far away, fires burned on the horizon. Human soldiers marched, searching for the same aliens he now sheltered. The night was not over. The blood in the snow was only the beginning. The storm eased by morning. Snow still fell, soft and steady, but the terrible wind had gone. The world outside the cave lay covered in white silence, broken only by the black stains of blood where beasts had fallen. The man sat awake, his knife still in hand, his eyes fixed on the forest. He had not slept. Every sound in the night had kept him sharp, waiting for the hunters to return. But they had not. Not yet. Behind him, the fire burned low, casting warm light over the alien child and its mother. The child stirred first, yawning, then looking up at the human with sleepy, glowing eyes. When it realized he was still sitting guard, still awake, it scrambled closer. "You did not rest," the child said softly. The man shrugged. Someone had to watch. The child's eyes filled with awe. "You are strong. Stronger than anyone I have seen." He looked away, uncomfortable with the words. Strength, he knew, was not endless. His body still ached from the wounds of the night. His arm throbbed where claws had cut deep. He was alive only because of the mother's strange healing gift, and even that had nearly cost her life. As if hearing his thoughts, the mother stirred. She opened her eyes, faint silver light glowing within them. Her voice was weak but clearer than before. "You saved us, human. You risked yourself for strangers." The man shook his head. "I only did what had to be done." The mother studied him. "No, most of your kind would have left us in the snow. You did not. For that we owe you more than thanks. We owe you life." The child nodded eagerly. "Yes, a life debt. That is our way. We will follow you, protect you, forever." The man's brows furrowed. "I don't need anyone to follow me." The child tilted its head. "Then we will stay until you say we may go. But we will not forget." The man sighed. He had never asked for this. He had lived alone for so long, moving from place to place, never letting anyone close. Now somehow he had become protector of a mother and child who were not even human. He almost said he would leave when the storm ended. Almost. But then he looked at the child's eyes, full of trust, and the mother's pale face still weak. The words would not come. Before he could speak, the mother's expression changed. Her eyes sharpened, glowing brighter. She turned her head toward the cave entrance. "Something else comes," she whispered. The man stiffened, knife in hand. "Hunters?" She shook her head slowly. "Not beasts, men." The child gasped, grabbing her arm. "Soldiers?" The mother nodded. "They hunt us. They have burned villages. They will not spare us." The man froze. He had heard the rumors. Units of human soldiers moving through the snowy lands, searching for alien settlements, claiming the land for themselves. He had ignored it before, kept to himself. But now they were here. He stood, stepping to the cave mouth. In the distance, through the falling snow, he saw faint shapes moving, dark figures against the white. Smoke rose behind them, thin and gray, the mark of a camp or a fire. Soldiers, without a doubt. The child's voice trembled. "They will find us, won't they?" The man's jaw tightened. "If they search, yes." The mother pushed herself up on one elbow, her body shaking with effort. "If they find us, we die. They will not care that my child is small. They will not care that you saved us. You will be called a traitor for standing with us." Her words hit him hard. He knew she was right. His people would not forgive this. To protect aliens against his own kind was betrayal. The child crawled to him, clutching his sleeve. "What will you do, human? Will you give us to them?" He looked down at the child, then at the weak mother behind it. His mind raged with doubt. To stand against beasts was one thing. To stand against men, his own men, was another. Yet he remembered the night before. The child begging for help. The mother's hand glowing on his chest. The blood he had spilled, the promise he had given. You won't leave. The man's hand tightened on his knife. His voice was quiet but strong. I made a promise, and I don't break promises. The child's eyes filled with tears, but this time they were tears of relief. It hugged him tightly, whispering, Then we are not afraid. Not while you are here. The mother's gaze softened. She nodded slowly. Then you are more than strong. You are just... The man turned back to the forest. The soldiers were closer now, their shapes clearer. He saw armor gleaming faintly, rifles slung across shoulders. His own people marching through the snow, searching for prey. He knew what choice lay before him. If he stayed silent, they would find the cave and kill the mother and child. If he stepped aside, he would live, but their blood would be on his hands. And if he stood against them, he would make enemies of his own kind. The storm had passed, but inside the man's chest a greater storm began to rise. He whispered to himself, steady as iron, If they want you, they'll have to go through me. The fire burned low behind him. The child's hand gripped his tightly. The mother closed her eyes, trusting him. And out in the snow, the soldiers marched closer. The promise had been made. Soon it would be tested. The snow fell softer now, but the sound of boots was louder. The man stood at the cave mouth, watching dark shapes move through the white. Human soldiers, his own kind. Their rifles glinted faintly. Their voices carried low across the storm. They were searching, hunting. Behind him, the alien child clung to his coat, trembling. Its glowing eyes were wide with fear. The mother, weak but awake, leaned against the stone wall, her silver gaze sharp despite her pain. She spoke in a hoarse whisper. If they find us, they will kill us both. You too, if you resist. The man's grip tightened on his knife. His body still ached from the battle with the hunters, but he stood tall. Then I'll resist anyway. The mother studied him, her expression unreadable. At last she whispered, Then you are no ordinary man. The child buried its face in his side. Please don't let them take us, please. The crunch of boots grew closer. The man stepped into the snow away from the cave. He wanted the soldiers to see only him, not the ones behind him. He planted his feet firm and waited. The first soldier appeared through the storm, his rifle raised. Others followed, forming a line. Their captain, a tall man with a scar across his cheek, lifted his hand. You there, he shouted. Step aside. We know aliens are near. Have you seen them? The man's jaw clenched. He stood silent. The captain narrowed his eyes. Answer me. Did you see them? Finally, the man spoke. His voice was steady, low like iron. They're not here. And if they were, you'd have to walk over me to reach them. A ripple went through the soldiers. Some muttered. Others raised their weapons higher. The captain's face hardened. You would defend them? Traitor to your own blood? The man did not move. I defend life. That's all that matters. The soldiers advanced a step. The child gasped, clutching tighter to its mother inside the cave. The man could hear its soft cry. He will fight them too. He will fight everyone for us, the captain spat into the snow. Last chance. Step aside. The man raised his knife, his stance unbroken. Try me. For a moment, no one moved. The wind whistled between them, carrying the tension like a blade. Then slowly the captain lowered his hand. His eyes were sharp, but behind them was something else, hesitation. This fool stands alone, one soldier muttered. But the captain shook his head. His voice was quiet, almost grudging. No. He stands the way men once did when honor meant more than orders. He looked at the others. Lower your weapons. The soldiers shifted uneasily. Some obeyed. A few kept their rifles raised. The captain stepped closer, his boots crunching in the blood-stained snow. He stopped a few feet from the man, studying his torn coat, the scars, the knife still dripping black blood from beasts. His eyes flickered toward the cave behind him. There are aliens in there, aren't there? He asked softly. The man said nothing. His silence was answer enough. The captain sighed, then turned to his men. We saw nothing here. Move out. The soldiers stared in shock. But sir, one began. I said, move out. The captain barked. His voice cut like steel. Reluctantly, the soldiers obeyed, fading back into the storm, their boots carrying them away. Soon only the captain remained. He looked back at the man one last time. His scarred face was grim, but there was respect in his eyes. One day you'll pay for this, but not by my hand. Then he turned and walked into the snow, his figure vanishing into the white. The man stood frozen, knife still raised until the last sound of boots was gone. Only then did he lower his arm, his breath shaking from the weight of what had passed. Behind him, the child rushed out of the cave, throwing its arms around him. "You did it," it cried, tears shining in its eyes. "You stood against them too." The mother came slowly, leaning on the cave wall for support. Her voice was weak but proud. "You chose us, even when it meant turning against your own kind. That is something few would ever do. For that, we will never forget you." The man looked at them, at the small child glowing with life, at the mother pale but still breathing, and felt the truth press heavy on him. He was no longer alone. He had chosen this, chosen them. He sheathed his knife at last and looked out at the endless snow. "Come on," he said quietly. "We can't stay here. There will be others." The child smiled, gripping his hand tightly. "Then we go together." The mother nodded slowly, her eyes shining. And so, a man once alone in the storm now walked with two at his side, a promise kept, a bond forged in blood and fire. Far away, whispers would grow, of a human who stood against beasts, against soldiers, against death itself, not for power, not for glory, but for the simple cry of a child in the snow, and across the cold stars the story would spread. Humanity. Yeah.